What is up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Not So Stupid podcast. Today we have a previous guest on the show coming on for a second time, and my good friend Elisabeth Kristof, who is the founder of Brain-Based Wellness. Previously, when she was on the show, she talked about the nervous system, stress, and how having chronic stress and a overly sensitive fight or flight response can be the difference between living a happier, healthier life or living a life that is debilitated to the point where you feel trapped in your own body. And now this time around, Elisabeth wants to take it a step further, right? She asked to come on the show, and I was super excited to have her on because she has been working on a new way to access the nervous system to stop you from binge eating and emotional eating, or at least to manage that more appropriately on your way to food freedom as well. Because again, we never want to be trapped by our thoughts. We never want to be trapped by our impulses or our own body. We want to be the navigator of our ship, of our body's ship. And the better that we can understand our nervous system and the beliefs we have around ourselves, the food we're eating, the easier it is going to be for us to navigate that. So she shares her insights on how she helps people overcome emotional eating, binge eating, overeating through practice and mastering the nervous system and other kind of activities. And we also talked about resolution setting as well, and how people usually have a backwards approach whenever they set their goals, and how to properly set their goals so that they can have as little resistance as possible in reaching the end point. So super impactful talk, really fun conversation. You're going to be able to hear how much fun we're having while I'm excited for you guys to dive into it and hopefully gain a lot of value as well. So without further ado, here is the podcast interview with Elisabeth Kristof. All right, Elisabeth Kristof, welcome again to the Not So Stupid podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back. I love talking with you.
No, of course. We always have a great conversation, and your episode, this probably came out this time last year, had really great feedback. So I'm sure the listeners are going to be excited to hear from you again. For anyone hearing you for the first time, why don't you give yourself a little intro? It doesn't have to be as in-depth as last time, but something to get the people familiar with you.
Yeah, my name's Elisabeth Kristof, and I'm the founder of Brain-Based Wellness, which is a virtual platform where we work on training the nervous system to be more resilient. We put the nervous system at the center of everything, whether that's behavior change or athletic performance or mindset coaching or trauma resolution. And we really look at how do we make practical changes in the nervous system, in the operating system, so that then we can experience a different result in our life. And I also do a lot of work with people with disordered eating, binge eating disorder, people who are stuck in diet culture and stuck in patterns of yo-yo dieting and deprivation and self-punishment and overtraining, and really have spent a lot of time diving into what's going on there at the level of the nervous system, the subconscious mind, and the body to really change that behavior in a lasting way.
Mm-hmm. I like the approach that you take with this, because I don't think many people realize that everything starts with the nervous system first and foremost, and then branches out, right? They try to treat the symptoms, like the things you mentioned, the emotional eating directly or the binge eating directly, whatever coping mechanism they're using. They're trying to work on that specifically, but the root cause is, starting with the nervous system. So can you talk more about the connection that has and, where it kind of stems from?
Yeah, so our nervous system is our operating system. It's what brings information from the brain down into the body and from the body back up into the brain. And it really drives all of our behavior. It drives our internal felt sense of well-being or not well-being, or, feeling stressed out, feeling under threat. All of that comes as a response of the nervous system. And all of the sensations and experiences that you're having from your nervous system come from one big decision that your brain is making on a second by second basis, which is safe or unsafe. Our brain's primary job is our survival, and it will always put that at the forefront of our behavior. And so all behaviors, whether that is overeating, stress eating, emotional eating, any kind of behavior, is brain's best bet to get the stimulus that it needs to either activate and provide fuel and activation to certain important areas of the brain, or to regulate the nervous system to make it feel calm and safe and keep our body and our nervous system in a well-regulated state.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. So Basically, any kind of negative emotion that stems from the nervous system as a response is a, reaction to a perceived threat, right? In other words, is that kind of where you're getting with this?
Yes, well, when it comes to eating specifically, right? There's
Hmm.
a couple different things that we have to really look at because like you said, a lot of people try to address the symptom at the level of their cognitive mind, right? I want to stick to a certain diet plan. I want to eat in a certain way to get me towards my goals. I don't want to eat foods that are harmful to my body, that I have an allergic reaction to, that make me feel
Hmm.
bad. But there's a lot of different ways that our brain and our body use food practically to keep us safe. And so one of the big ways is through, we say this all the time, we say stress eating, but we very rarely stop to think about what does that mean that I'm stress
Hmm.
eating? What is stress? And at a very physiological level, stress is something that is going on inside of your body. It's the production of certain hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. It is a threat response of your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight and flight system, that increases your heart rate, that moves all of the blood from your organs out into your limbs so that it's preparing you to take action. It's your arousal response, getting you ready to run or fight, or maybe a worst case scenario, you've been in that stress response for a while, and to freeze. And that is called our sympathetic nervous system response, and it serves a purpose. And we need a little bit of stress. A little bit of stress causes adaptation, and it's good, but it is not safe to stay in that state for a long time. Chronic stress is very dangerous. What starts to happen when we're under stress and we're stuck in that high stress state, whether that's from unresolved trauma or just a lifestyle that produces a lot of threat, a lot of stress, the stress of a pandemic, the stress of a high stress job, or relational stress. When we get stuck in that state, our body is pumping out adrenaline and cortisol all of the time. And cortisol, especially, is very damaging to our blood vessels, to our nerves, and it dysregulates our immune system, leads to inflammation, and creates a state inside of the body that primes us for disease, for autoimmune disease, for cancer, for addiction and mental health issues. And our brains, our bodies, our nervous system is very intelligent, and it understands that staying stuck in that state for too long is dangerous. And so it will do something to reduce the stress, to get us to upregulate our parasympathetic system, our calm and respond, our rest and digest system. So
Hmm.
when we are in that high stress state for too long, we may feel driven to eat a bunch of food, to eat a bunch of food very quickly, to eat a bunch of food that is high calorie and has a lot of glucose. And it will actually be our body's way of regulating itself, of modulating out of the sympathetic system, out of the sympathetic response into more of a parasympathetic way of being, so that you can rest, recover, and heal in a so to speak, from that high stress state. And so a lot of times when it comes to stress eating, that is our nervous system and our body's best way to keep us safe in that moment.
Hmm. No, I really love the perspective and how you dove into that because I think it cleared a lot of a lot of questions that people had and gave them a better perspective. I actually want to hear your perspective on how I like to describe this because when I think about our body's systems and how they work, I always like to relate it back to caveman times and how cavemen used to operate and what the value of this was for a caveman, right? And if you are in a stressed state, you are being chased by a dinosaur, running out of food, needing to run or directly fight this dinosaur, and that's going to require fuel for yourself. So your body's going to
Mhm.
turn to food to get energy to fight the dinosaur or run away from the dinosaur or to stay fed long enough to overcome a famine or something like that, right? And I just think our body just hasn't outgrown that process yet, at the rate of how the world is developing, because now getting stressed is as easy as looking at a notification on your phone and not seeing something you like, right? And it's still going to respond in that same way. It's still going to want us to eat food because it's perceiving it as that kind of level of danger. Would you agree with how that is?
Yeah, I think in some ways, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's providing us with fuel, but in another way, it is very practically giving stimulus to certain areas of the brain. When we eat a bunch of food, certain nerves get a big boost of stimulus, our celiac plexus, our vagus nerve, our
Mm-hmm.
insular cortex, and these are areas of the brain that upregulate your parasympathetic system, your common respond network, and they also are key players in your interoceptive system, which is the system that tells your brain what's going on inside of your body. And so, in that very second, in that moment, your nervous system is getting the regulation that it needs to calm down and to move out of that stress state. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's not even really saving up the fuel supply for later. It is doing what it knows to do best and most efficiently to bring you
Mm-hmm.
into a healthier state of being, even though that may not be in alignment with your long-term goals. It is
Mm-hmm.
actually keeping you safer and healthier in that moment by stress eating. And that stress response, it's not just that our bodies haven't kept up with us, it's
Okay.
that our culture
Mm-hmm.
is dysregulating to the animal body. And so I think there are maybe ways in which we still can see that threat signal as a signal of where is my life out of alignment with what really works for my nervous system and my body. There's so many parts of our society that are disruptive to the nervous system and to the body that are not conducive to health. We don't spend a lot of time in nature. We don't
Mm-hmm.
move a lot. We don't use our visual system in all of its different functions. Our respiration is often very faulty and inefficient, and that's very threatening. And we put ourselves into chronic stress situations with our jobs, with our relationships, with codependent patterns
Mm-hmm.
that then are actually dangerous and harmful to us. And so that threat response is not just an an old outdated patterning, but it's a real response that's saying something about this situation and this lifestyle is not conducive to my optimal health and to my well-being. And where do I need to start to make changes in my life to live in alignment with a life and a way of being that allows me to stay regulated and feel safe in my body?
Mm. I like that deeper perspective of it, and the perspective shift that you know helped me see that it's not our body, but the culture and environment that our body is in that is putting our body in this unsafe space. And I think at maybe hearing that for the first time as a listener, it's like, but I can't get away from this culture. I can't get away from the society. So how am I supposed to break free and change this so that my body is in a healthier position? That seems like a really daunting, big task to ask of somebody, right? Just out of the blue, at first glance. So what kind of approach do you usually take in regards to this to put your body in a better position, while still being in the culture, not needing to be off the grid or anything like that?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think as within, so without, right? So it always starts on the inside first.
Yeah.
It's always about rewiring the patterns that keep us in these high stress states. And sometimes that looks like resolving old trauma that is stuck in the body, old emotions that are stuck in the body. And sometimes it's about changing our identity and our deep beliefs that keep us held in these patterns, because a lot of times it's not really what we're doing, it's our thoughts about what we're doing. It's the
Mm,
overwhelm, it's the anxiety. It's not that I'm working myself into the ground, but it's that my mind is obsessing about work all of the time and replaying the conversations and running the numbers in my head, and in that state of high stress and overwhelm. That's what's really exhausting and burning out to the nervous system and keeping me in that high stress state. So can I learn practical tools from the body up to start to create, first and foremost, a sense of safety inside of my own body, inside of myself, so that I can begin to do this work of changing my beliefs, changing my patterns, and then changing my behaviors. Beliefs, patterns, and behaviors coming lastly. Can I change my identity inside? And in order to be able to change those beliefs and that identity, I first have to operate from a place of safety. If I'm coming into this from a really dysregulated state where I feel very stressed out, where I feel very overwhelmed, depleted, fatigued, exhausted, it's difficult to make those big changes in, especially in deep core beliefs, because that also is threatening to the system. You've been relying on those beliefs for a long time to keep you safe, to ensure your survival. And so it's not as easy as just changing our mindset. We have to first feel safe in our body. And so I take a very bottom up approach to that, in providing the body and the nervous system with stimulus that it needs to heal deficits in the nervous system, um, to heal deficits in the visual system, the balance system in your inner ear, the body mapping system, so that your brain is getting better quality information coming in all of the time. And then it can do its primary job, which is making predictions to keep you alive, with more ease. So that's less threat on a second by second basis. And you're reducing the stress that your system is under all of the time by training those input systems to experience a new output. And then you can also do things like work on your respiration, give your vagus nerve stimulus, stimulate and reset certain important cranial nerves, and just start to work with the system in a very body based approach, so that internally we're creating this felt sense of safety and well-being, and then allowing change to come from there, rather than trying to restructure our whole external life and then not dealing with the inside first.
Mm. No, I like that approach a lot, because it makes, when you break it down like that, it makes a lot more rational sense. You know, you are that system that you kind of outlined, beliefs to patterns to behaviors, is, I think, really powerful, because, you know, when you try to change just your behaviors, which is the last step of this entire process, and what we talked about most people are doing, you are now resisting these other two steps. It's already created momentum to go in this certain direction, and it's going to be hard to stop and change direction when it's already going as hard as it can in this one direction. So if you shift the belief, shift how you view the situation, how you are viewing yourself, your identity, like you mentioned, you're already on a different trajectory to get to somewhere else, and more likely the place you want to go, right? And I think that's, a cool way to look at it, and cool visualization to change how people are going to approach problem solving for themselves.
Yeah, I think that so many times, like, we'll make a big resolution trying to get somewhere with our health or our body or our behavior, and we don't change the deep core beliefs or the deep core identity. And what happens is then our subconscious mind, which is responsible for about 80% of our behavior, and it also sets all of our autonomic functions, our heart
Mhm.
rate, our respiration, the felt sense inside of the body, isn't changing. Our homeostatic set point where we feel safe at isn't changing. And so we have to be able to change those deep beliefs and that identity. But again, we develop these beliefs at a very early age, sometimes infancy, usually between the ages of 0 to 7. And they're always developed in an attempt to ensure our survival. We have these core wounds that are times when our needs are not met. When we're infants and small children, we're entirely dependent upon our caregivers for our survival. And so there will be always times where we don't get our needs met, where we don't get the attention that we need, where we don't get the love that we perceive that we need, where there's even maybe just a perception of neglect and abandonment, even if it's not real, and we
Mhm.
perceive it that way as this being, or we don't get the nourishment that we need, the time. And we have an option in that moment. We have two choices. We could either decide that we are inherently perfect, these perfect little divine beings, but that the world is unpredictable and unsafe, and we just never know if we're going to survive or not. Or we could say, well, the world is predictable. I can recognize the patterns in it, and I can change something about myself in order to ensure my survival. And it's really more adaptive to decide I can change something about myself. And so we develop these deep beliefs that maybe my desires are too much, or it's unsafe to
Mhm.
express my emotions, or I'm not worthy, or I'm bad. And we hold these beliefs deep, deep down in our subconscious mind. And then everything we do on top of that is built on those beliefs. And it drives our behavior in an attempt to keep us safe, to keep us surviving. And then when we try to change that way of being, it's very threatening, because for a long, long time, we've decided that that's how we need to be in order to survive. So again, we have to learn how to bring in these new beliefs, that I'm worthy, that my desires serve the world, that visibility is an act of service. We have to learn how to bring in these new beliefs in a way that we are also creating safety in the nervous system and in the body at the same time, so that our subconscious and our body will accept that belief without moving us into a protective mode and without experiencing so much stress from trying to change the identity.
Mhm. No, there's a lot of great tidbits in there that you said. You touched on resolutions. I want to get in that, and I want to get more into that in a little bit. But what I really like that you said is when you've experienced and thought something for so long, it can come as threatening to change that belief because it's so different from what you faced. And even though you're feeling this real emotion, you can't argue that you feel threatened by changing your belief. It's not necessarily true objectively that this is the wrong thing for you. It's just a familiarity kind of thing. And you won't recognize whether that's good or bad for you in the long run until you actually start practicing it and seeing how this domino effect changes your patterns and changes your behaviors from changing your beliefs. But you have to kind of overcome that threatening feeling first and foremost. That's kind of scary, I think, for a lot of people to fight that threateningness, don't you think?
Absolutely. It doesn't feel safe, even though cognitively you understand. And I'll just give an example of setting a boundary, because a lot of times for us to be able to achieve our goals, we have to be able to claim our sovereignty, to set our boundaries, to claim time for ourselves, our health, for our healing, to make time for food prep, to make time for working out, to make time to care for ourselves. And if we have leaky boundaries and we can't take care of ourselves without feeling guilt and shame and feel like we constantly have to be sacrificing our own needs to ensure that other people are comfortable or safe or happy, we take on other people's emotions, then it's very hard to achieve our goals. But going against that and setting a boundary, moving out of a codependent pattern, can feel incredibly threatening at the level of the body. It makes your heart race. It makes your throat tighten up. Maybe your palms start sweating. And at some deep level of your subconscious mind, it feels like you might die. It feels like if I separate myself, if I unenmesh myself from people, if I'm not people pleasing and ensuring that I'm not rejected from the herd or punished in some way for taking care of myself, then I might not survive. And so there's a real survival response that kicks in, and it feels very unsafe. And then what happens if we don't re-regulate, if we don't use tools to calm the nervous system and the body as we try to move into that new behavior of protecting our boundaries, protecting our energy, protecting our time, then we keep stressing ourselves out with that survival response. And then we move into that state of chronic stress that, again, then we end up using things like food, things like alcohol, things like overtraining to re-regulate our bodies because we're stuck in chronic stress. So how do we start to embrace and embody the new beliefs and identities that we want to, that that I have a right to claim my sovereignty, that it serves the world if I protect my energy and I nourish myself? And how do I do that without pushing myself into threat? And there's a way to really work with the body and the nervous system as you're taking those actions. So before I do something like that, before I have a difficult conversation, or I make the time for myself, or I take a contrary action that's in alignment with my new belief, I do some neuro drills. I do neural exercises to make my body and my nervous system feel safe. And then I take the action. Then I have the conversation. Then I use my voice. I speak my truth. And then I re-regulate after with something that my nervous system likes. And that could be neuro drills. That could be a walk in nature. That could just be some nice sensory stimulus, a bath, whatever it is that I know makes my body and my nervous system feel safe again, so that I can move into these new ways of being without having to push myself into threat response.
I really like that approach that you outlined, because when you go through that process, right, I visualize kind of a bell curve, but I'm also thinking about how it relates to working out. This is basically a mental workout. You go through a little warm up, get yourself prepared for this strenuous in a way event, mentally, emotionally strenuous event that you're going to be facing. And then you kind of go through a cool down right after to recover from that. So you prep yourself, you engage in that event, and then you cool down and give your body a nice reset to recover from that. And you do that enough times, you'll be strong enough mentally and emotionally to continue to face that without needing as much prep in most cases. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Everything is a skill. Every skill is trainable, right? And whatever we do, we get better at. So if we can
Mhm.
keep practicing it and creating that felt sense of safety and well-being while we're doing it inside of our body, inside of our system over and over and over again, then our body stops reacting in that same protective way, because what we'll do otherwise is push into a high stress state where our body will move into a protective mode. And that could look like a binge, but it could also look like pain to
Mhm.
get you to reduce your interaction with the world. It could look like a migraine. It could look like dizziness and fatigue. And then eventually you just give up. You give up on the thing that you're trying to change about yourself, on the new behavior, on the new habits, because the cost is too high, because the protective mechanism is too painful. And so then we just go back to the old, safe, comfortable way of being, even though that is not in alignment with our
Mhm.
highest intention for ourselves.
Mhm. Nice. No, I love that. I love that. So now these perspectives, I think, can be really helpful for setting resolutions and setting resolutions kind of the right way, quote unquote, right? Because I think a lot of people, again, work through resolutions, set goals, set expectations backwards, like you mentioned. What is your okay? So I'm going to ask two questions. Where do you think most people go wrong with setting resolutions? And what do you think would be the easiest thing to make it better, set better resolutions for themselves?
I think that it takes really addressing, like, so many people, we set resolutions, and about 95% of people by the end of February is gone, right? So
Right.
it's just insane to keep putting that pressure on ourselves and repeating the same thing over and over again, and then feeling shame and disappointment and guilt and punishing ourselves for not being able to do this when nobody can do it. Nobody, it's not working for anybody. You're
Right.
fine. You're just being a normal person. That it just doesn't work that way. And
Hmm.
so start being compassionate with ourselves and understanding that we have to work with the body and the nervous system and bring them along in creating this behavior change, or else we're going to be driven by a dysregulated system that is trying to keep us safe in the face of this change. So starting to have some compassion and looking at how the system is doing. And then for me, when it comes to resolutions, I really try not to like put more on myself. For me, it's a lot about, what do I need to release? Where do I need to let go so that I am able to remove some of the things that are keeping me from my fullest expression of myself? I really believe that inside of myself, intuitively, I know exactly what to eat.
Hmm.
Intuitively, I know how I want to move. Intuitively, my body knows how to heal itself. And I am different from everybody else, and everybody knows inside of themselves what is right for them. But we have so much layered on top of that that keep us from being able to hear, listen to, and act on that internal instinct, that wisdom inside of ourselves. So, what can I do to remove the things that are blocking me from being fully connected to my own internal wisdom and to expressing my own self freely?
Hmm. No, there's a lot of really cool, powerful points that you touched on there that I would love to expand on. First one being you had mentioned working with your body and mind and nervous system to and bringing them along in the process and helping you uh, get to where you want to be. Because I think one big reason that most resolutions fail is people think of the end point, think of where they want to be, and think of the person they are at the end, and they make resolutions as if they were already that person, instead of meeting their body where they're at, meeting their body's needs where they're at, their emotional needs where they're at, and being honest with themselves about their current uh, willpower, maybe their lifestyle, their understanding of certain situations, and they end up overreaching or doing something they're not prepared yet to do. Right. I like to compare it to, you're applying for a experienced job that requires a PhD, but you just graduated high school. It's not going to go well for you once you're in that job, because you're not that person. Not that you can't ever do that job, but you just can't do it yet. And you kind of got to be honest with yourself and manage those expectations before you hurt yourself, damage your self-confidence, damage your self-efficacy. Um, you want to go deeper on that for me?
Yeah, I think absolutely. People set these really far out expectations for themselves, which is really just playing into their same narratives of perfectionism, of self-punishment, of um, creating a structure that doesn't serve them. And so it's really, this issue is, it's complex and it's layered, and
Hmm.
the food is a symptom. The food is a symptom of an underlying issue, whether that is the amount of stress that's surging through the system, whether it is suppressed emotions, which we can definitely talk more about in emotional eating,
Hmm.
whether it is the identity that's going on there. And so rather than like looking at the food or the drinking or the exercise as this, external problem that you need to solve about yourself, but like use it as a portal to what inside needs to be healed, what needs to be expressed. How
Hmm.
can I create this inside of myself so that this change becomes possible without just trying to wrangle it from outside of myself?
Hmm. No, that's great, because then you're not starting at step 5, you're actually starting at step 1, and it's, creating that awareness, unsuppressing those suppressed emotions,
Mhm.
and facing them head on and working with them to overcome them. So now you said we could dive deeper in that. Let's dive deeper into that. What does that look like, and what are some common examples of that?
Yeah. So the other, main driver of disordered eating is sort of stress eating, which is just we're using food as a tool for self-regulation because our nervous system is dysregulated and stuck in a high stress, hyper-arousal state. And then we also have emotional eating, which again, we're naming it as a society. We talk about it all the time. Oh, I'm emotionally eating. But like,
Hmm.
what does that actually mean? What am I doing? And we are taught in this society, both trauma and society really damage our emotional nature. So whether that's we learn from our parents or we learn from society at large, we learn to mute our emotions as children. We learn that certain emotions are bad, that if you express your anger you might get punished. If you cry, maybe you're weak. If you um, express your emotions, maybe it stresses out your caregiver, and as a young child you can sense that.
Hmm.
Maybe you get sent to your room and you get isolated from the herd. And we learn that there are just certain emotions, jealousy, anger, grief, that are bad, but there are consequences to trying to sanitize all those emotions.
Hmm.
And emotions are really physiological things that happen inside of our body. There is a physical response with emotions. There is an energetic chemical reaction that happens inside of our body when we have emotions. And our bodies, our animal bodies, are meant to express those emotions. If you look around the world, people cry. It is a normal physiological release of that chemical energetic reaction inside of the body. People laugh, people scream when they're angry, people shake when they're scared, right? This is, our animal body understands how to express these emotions. But because we are taught not to, and it doesn't feel safe for whatever reason to express our emotions, will be rejected, abandoned, punished, we start to suppress those emotions, and it causes a lot of damage to our internal systems because they're meant to be discharged. I have one teacher that talks about emotions are like poop. Everybody needs to poop. And if you don't, that's a problem, right? And it's the same thing. Everybody needs to sneeze. Like, we're just meant to express these emotions, but we're taught that we're not allowed to. And then what happens is we end up living in this really numbed out emotional state that's very damaging to our body, but it's also damaging to our human spirit, which wants to feel emotions. And if we numb out some emotions like grief, like anger, the emotions are all part of one big spectrum. And we're also then numbing out our ability to experience joy, pleasure, relaxation, human connection. So we're
Hmm.
blocking out the good ones too. And because we need to experience emotions, we start to find safe ways to experience those emotions. And for a lot of my clients, we put them into the food, right? We
Mm,
experience relaxation when we eat a bunch. We experience connection through feeling people's love for us when we eat the food. But like, really, the food is inanimate. It can't love me. It can't
mhm,
provide relaxation for me. It can't really give me excitement and joy. But we end up using the food to either get those emotions or to block out feeling the emotions because it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel safe to express our anger. It doesn't feel safe to sit with our grief. And so we have to learn how to successfully recognize and manage our own feelings and to allow ourselves to safely express those feelings.
mhm. No, I love what you're saying, and I think, there's definitely, without a doubt, there's going to be a lot of benefit to experiencing the emotions that you are kind of refusing to experience. But I think another barrier that might be in the way of this is, like you said, we are taught some of these emotions are bad from a young age. So now when you feel this emotion, you're judging yourself, right? And it creates kind of a negative feedback loop. And if you felt guilty for something, and you feel like you shouldn't feel guilty, now you're feeling guilty for feeling guilty. And it's just making this experience worse, which is, again, going to make the behavior, the magnitude of the behavior, even greater, to overcome that. So if the behaviors of emotional eating, like we were talking about, they're probably going to need to eat more to overcome the added guilt they're experiencing for feeling more guilt. And
That's right.
yeah, and it's, making it, you're taking even more steps backwards than you initially could have if you had accepted that emotion. Um, Obviously, this is something you practice, but what are some things you tell someone that really struggles with this aspect of being comfortable with facing these emotions without judging themselves?
Yeah, well, I can really relate to you if you're that person. I have lived most of my life relying on my intellect to like figure everything out to keep me
Mhm.
safe. And I was completely disconnected and frozen at the level of my limbic system, which is my emotional center. And it was very scary to me to start to learn how to express my emotions. I As a young child, I had big emotions, and I definitely felt that it was stressing out my caregiver, and I also was punished sometimes, and I was afraid that I was crazy for feeling the way that I felt. And I just learned to really separate myself from that. I could talk about a number of things with you. I could tell you all kinds of things that were sad or scary or bad, but I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it as I told you it. And so I started a practice of trying to tap into my anger, to tap into my grief, allowing myself 30 seconds in the morning to sit with my grief, to see what it felt like in my body, maybe placing my hand on my body and feeling where the grief was and breathing into that, and just this kind of minimum effective dose of expressing my grief. And what started to happen was I experienced autoimmune response. My joints started to swell up, I got eczema, my body was reacting because it did not feel safe,
Mm,
allowing me to express those emotions. And so people will experience all kinds of protective symptoms to keep them from expressing and releasing those emotions. And it could look like autoimmune response, it could look like pain, it could look like a severe desire to eat a bunch of food and go into that emotional eating behavior. And again, just like I had to do with my new behaviors and my new beliefs, I had to start to create a safe container inside of my body and inside of my world to express those emotions. And that looked like, again, doing certain neural exercises, especially breathing and vagus nerve stimulus prior, and then just allowing myself a little bit of time to be with the emotion or to maybe practice some tapping, some EFT tapping while I was revisiting an emotion, and speaking directly with my nervous system in that way. And then afterwards, again, re-regulating my system so that I was constantly teaching myself, hey, it's safe to express this emotion. It is safe to express this anger. And then questioning the beliefs that were leading me to the place where I felt like it wasn't safe.
mhm. I like that a lot, and I love that you shared that because I find that really relatable as well. I've been working on this over the last year or so, but I have been very disconnected from my emotions or facing my emotions and understanding what they even mean, to the point where I used to define myself as someone that didn't really experience emotions. I'm just able to recognize what I should be feeling at this point in time, pretty much what you described. So, really cool that you helped me connect personal dots, but also really cool that you gave a framework to help people overcome this as well. Of, allow yourself a minimum effective dose of experiencing it, where it's not so bad that you're going to, create that negative feedback loop we talked about. And then allowing yourself to recover from that, ease out of it, and forgive yourself, and be kind and comfortable, be kind and compassionate with yourself for feeling those things, so that this does and can become more of a regular thing for you. That's a really cool thing. Now, bringing this back to resolutions, we're going to connect things together now. Someone has a struggle with emotional eating. Someone has a struggle with their weight or their physical appearance, right? They think emotional eating is the cause, obviously, because that's what's leading to eat more. And they're trying to set a resolution to simultaneously stop emotional eating, simultaneously stop gaining weight, or at least lose weight. Where, what's your ideal framework for that when setting a resolution, and what perspective should they have? We've talked a lot about it, but I'd like to make it a little more clear cut.
So the best place to start is from a mindset of curiosity. So when you set the resolution, trying to remember to stay curious about your behavior. When you go against the resolution, what was happening? What was happening in your body? What were the sensations that you felt? What were the thoughts, the narrative loops racing through your mind, and use the behavior when you engage in it, and know that that's going to happen sometimes, because habit change is hard. And if we can have compassion and just understand that first and foremost, and that it is our body and our system just trying to protect us. What was happening when I went contrary to the behavior that I was trying to move into, when I had the binge, when I overate, when I emotionally ate? And then, so first, just getting curious and asking, like, was my body sending me signals before? What were those signals? What did that feel like? And can I start to interrupt that earlier on, when I first hear those signals, those quieter, softer signals, before I'm so dysregulated, and do some drills, do some neural exercises for my body, do something that my nervous system likes, so that I can interrupt that dysregulation prior. And then once you start to get more regulated and feel that you have the tools to, to bring your nervous system back into a state, if you find that, hey, I've done some neuro drills, I'm pretty regulated, I've done some stuff my nervous system likes, and I still really want to eat all of this food, what's the emotional component going on then there? Because that's beyond just using food as a tool for self-regulation. Now we're probably diving into emotional eating, and the best way that I've found to start to pull up some of those emotions is to actually use that behavior to lead me into exploring that emotion. Let that be the trigger. So if I am standing there and I just really want to go to the kitchen and open up the fridge and eat everything inside, maybe have the food out and physically push it away, and then start doing something like some neuro drills to regulate yourself, like some EFT tapping, and start to explore, what is it that I'm feeling right now? What's the sensation in my chest? What's the sensation in my belly? What's the sensation in my throat and between my eyes? And then can I start to name the emotions that go with that? And then, what does this emotion remind me of? What does this take me back to? What do I need to say or do or express right now that the food is keeping me from? Maybe I need to scream into a pillow. Maybe I need to cry. Maybe I need to punch the pillow and get that movement out. I mean, I do a lot of pillow screaming and a lot of pillow punching, because it's normal to need to express anger, but we don't feel safe doing that. But if I can remove the behavior and create a little bit of safety in my body, and then just be like, what is this? What's going on? Be curious about that. And then start to intuitively trust my body to express it how it needs to. And maybe look to it like, where is this? What fragment of myself is experiencing this emotion now? Is it my present self, or is it like my 3-year-old self? Is it my 5-year-old self? Is it myself from 5 years ago when I lost my business that never got to express this emotion? And just follow those sensations back and see what needs to come out.
What I really appreciate about how you approach these things, and I'm sure the listeners can appreciate it just as much too, is that you give them, a renewed sense of control by trying to go through this process, right? Like you mentioned, go through and feel these things and allow yourself to go through your old behavior process. But instead of being someone along for the ride, just a passenger through this process, be the person in the driver's seat and actually kind of see what turns you're making and what actions you're taking and responses you're doing and how uh, I guess lost my train of thought. I was trying to go with the analogy even further, but like you're reading everything that's going on, and you're actually participating in this um, experience proactively instead of reactively. And now that gives you a chance to continue staying in the driver's seat next time this happens and making different decisions, making different turns to and from or away um, to these behaviors, right? And I like how you give these alternatives, but do you recommend, I think like this is an approach that a lot of people take when it comes to emotional eating. And when I say that, I mean other coaches, replacing these activities with something else. You had mentioned screaming into the pillow and punching the pillow as another outlet, but do you recommend switching it to something more positive, like a creative expression of anger or a creative expression of grief, as opposed to maybe someone that's more opposed to physical violence would feel bad about fighting a pillow. What is your opinion on that? And do you have alternatives if you do like that?
I think it's great to creatively express your emotions and use that as an outlet. I think if you can paint it or sing it or write it, and page purge it is a beautiful way to let some of that stuff out. I also think there is a somatic component to healing where our body really does need to express things
Mm,
through movement, through crying, through screaming, through shaking. And so there I think it's beautiful to express it creatively and to also not bypass the release in the body and to allow your body to do the weird things that it needs to do
mhm,
to express these physiological, energetic things that are emotions. And maybe that's dance around, maybe it's jump, maybe it's walk, maybe it's rest. Maybe your body needs to lay down and take some deep breaths and long exhales. And ultimately, like you are the expert of that,
mhm,
which is what you were kind of saying too. Like it gives people some agency to start to. What I really like to do is just to teach people about the nervous system, to teach people about their body, and then let them become the expert of it because you know what you need and your body knows exactly how to move through this stuff. You just need to lean into it and to feel safe trusting it and then to let it express what it needs to.
mhm. So not kind of summing up what you said, it's not necessarily just have the creative expression or just replacing it with positivity. It's also allowing your body to express, like you mentioned, it is a physiological response to this emotion, to let it go through that entire progression while doing the other one if you so decide to.
Yeah, yeah, because I think we a lot of times creative expression can it is I'm very, very into it. I think it's a beautiful way to process and release emotions.
Hmm.
Um, and we just have to be careful that it doesn't stay too much in our cognitive mind only and to really allow like the whole system to release. And for some people with painting and dance and song, it's really bringing the whole system in and it's a very powerful release. And maybe you cry while you're doing it or you shake while you're doing it, and it's all a beautiful way of healing, and you will know your body and your system will know what the right way to heal is for you. But also to just no judgment on your body, and if someone's really afraid to hit a pillow or really afraid to scream, they might want to look into that. Why am I so afraid of this? Why
Mm.
is this so threatening to me? And that might be an indication that they do have a lot of suppressed anger and it's something that they've been really holding back because that's just a natural process.
Hmm. I like that how you bring it back to the starting point again of always being curious whenever you face this kind of resistance when you don't want to do something. Because,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, the beliefs are so ingrained, the ideas of what we should be doing are so ingrained that we haven't questioned them in years, decades, in some instances. And maybe that's just what we need, a refreshment of asking these questions and getting to a better understanding.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so now we are coming a little bit to the end of our time. I do want to be respectful of your time. Where can people find you if they want to see more of what you do and see more of your work?
The best place to find me is through my website, which is brainbase-wellness.com. You can get a video series there that will teach you 5 practical exercises that you can use daily to regulate your nervous system, just see how this feels in your body, and to help yourself move out of some of these behaviors, these unwanted outputs of your nervous system. And then you can also just learn a little bit more about how to assess and reassess what works best for your nervous system and start to gain that insight into being the expert of your own nervous system. So you can start there and then reach out to me at any time if you're interested in food freedom and really changing the subconscious narratives, processing the emotions, and regulating the system so that you can really be free and have a healthy, peaceful relationship with your body.
Yeah, no, for sure. So anyone that is interested, those are going to be linked in the show notes. Elizabeth is as nice as she seems, so don't be shy. Feel free to reach out. She'll definitely help you out. And last question for you. So last time, you've been on the show before, so I've asked you the simple tip that you think people can do to help them out. This time, I'm going to ask more of a personality question. Imagine yourself, you are on a flight from Texas to Japan, very long flight. You get to bring with you a couple of things, including one passenger, anyone in history, dead or alive, that you'd love to have a conversation with, one album, song album that you would listen from front to back the entire time, and one book. What would those things be?
One album, one book, one person.
Yes.
Okay, I would love to have a conversation with Gabor Mate. He's the author of When the Body Says No, and he does, and In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and he's just a brilliant, really visionary healer, doctor with a very deep perspective on the body and the mind connection. The album that I would like to listen to, honestly, this sounds so lame. Like I used to listen to a lot of like rock and roll and whatever, but I think if I'm on a long flight, I really just want some frequencies that I could listen to and meditate and chill out to, and that would like move some energy through my chakras.
Mhm.
And the book that I would bring right now, I think I would bring Course in Miracles, which is my spiritual text that I use quite frequently.
Nice. I love that. So that sounds, you mentioned that sounds kind of lame. One time on Spotify, I downloaded an entire frequency playlist. And from a flight from Denver to Chicago, which is like a 2.5 hour flight, I just had it on repeat, closed my eyes, and sat back in my seat and kind of like melted into the pillow they gave me and hid under the blanket and stayed warm. And it was a beautiful experience.
I would love
Honestly, it
that.
was amazing.
Yeah, I
So
would love that.
yeah, so definitely not lame. If you're listening and thinking about trying it out, highly recommend trying it out. It's a great experience.
Yeah, it's like just use the flight for massive meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's only productive as opposed to just like sitting there waiting for it to be over. It seems like a
Yeah,
bad use of time that way.
totally. I love
Well,
that.
yeah. Well, thank you again, Elizabeth, so much for coming on the show. This is an incredibly powerful conversation. I think this is going to help a lot of people for sure. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm always honored to be here, and I love our conversations.
Yeah, no, they're always a lot of fun. I think people could feel the energy of how much fun we're having with each other. So this is great. But yeah, thank you again. And if you guys are interested in seeing Elizabeth's first episode, that is also going to be linked in the show notes. But otherwise, we will see you guys on the next episode.